You are listening to Catholic Family Podcast,
Episode 29.
Thank you so much for joining the show. I'm Kevin Davis. Yes, it's been a long hiatus. It's been a very busy summer. I hope for everybody else out there, you're staying busy, staying safe, staying holy. Of course, that's the most important. But we're back for another podcast here on the Catholic Family Podcast, and I'm very happy and honored to be joined by Father Carlos Borja and my dad. Thank you two for joining. And today we're going to talk about something a little more topical. Usually we like to talk about things that are kind of evergreen or things that are always important to our faith or to our culture. But this is a little more topical, a little bit more about what's going on in the news right now. And that's in regards to Bergoglio and his recent letter, or his recent, I don't even know, papal document called Traditionis Custodes, where pretty much he has gotten rid of Summorum Pontificum, which allows the free saying of the Latin Mass, in regards to the Novus Ordo. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, how it affects us, which honestly it doesn't really, but hopefully we hope that it will affect the growth of sedevacantism and traditional Catholics around the world. And to start that off and to start off the discussion, I think we need to start by kind of describing who we are and what we are as a movement. Because I was talking with my wife at the dinner table today, talking about sedevacantism, and it really is, as we all know, kind of this dirty word, and people hear it and think, oh, yuck, we don't want anything to do with that. But I think people don't really understand what that means. And so, Father Borja, I would ask if you could, in a few words, just basically describe what is sedevacantism, what is it that we believe in, what is traditional Catholicism?
Sure. So sedevacantism is the theological position that Catholics take in regards to the papacy, in regards to the claimants who are sitting in the throne in Rome. So the fact of the matter is that I believe all traditional Catholics use that term to describe people who essentially have an issue with Vatican II. With Vatican II was a council that was brought about in the 60s, and there were many questionable things that came about, and many and then some heresies that were promoted and taught, etc. And so it is that as Catholics, we see that there's been a crisis in the church, and this is the explanation for that crisis in the church. How could this have happened? And we say that those who implemented Vatican II were not truly in positions of authority. So we say that the seat of Peter is empty, and that there is no current pope in the chair of Peter, even though we have someone who claims to be so. We consider him to be an anti-pope.
Right, and that's it's hard for people to accept and hard to get to grips with that, I suppose, especially for people who've lived their whole lives in the Novus Ordo and seen Francis and JP2 and Benedict XVI as popes. But for us, I think we are all, our Father, you and I are cradle Catholics. So Dad, I guess you're not. So maybe Dad, I'll go to you and see what's your perspective as a convert for sedevacantism.
Good question. I think that one of the things we don't really appreciate and I would say I'm only partially a convert, so I don't get really the full conversion story as many do, because I was kind of converted through marriage and grew up in what I would call a moral agnostic household. So I kind of had a viewpoint growing up that was easy to convert to Catholicism. But one of the things I look at the road that people have to travel in order to get from the Novus Ordo into sedevacantism. And it is such a difficult road for the three of us. I don't think we really appreciate the fact that, we can look at sedevacantism, we can look at the situation, and we can go to anybody who is sincere in faith and say, hey, listen, you love your faith, you love the sacraments, you love the Latin Mass perhaps, and you love your church, and you can see that these popes, these anti-popes like Bergoglio, are making a mockery of your faith. Why don't you come and join us? But I think what we don't appreciate is the fact that there's so much fog for them. There's so many false and misleading arguments. There's so much social pressure. There's so much culture. There's so many different aspects to becoming an actual, sedevate contest that it's a difficult road. And I have all the admiration in the world for people who have made the transition from the Novus Ordo into sedevate contest. And I think they are some of the heroes of our modern time.
And Father, I would ask you, do you see more people recently coming to you or coming to the bishop maybe, or coming to the church to our position, from the Novus Ordo? Has that increased lately?
I would say definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And this past Sunday, I had in the back of my mind, I wonder if there's going to be more new people showing up. And sure enough, there was a good handful of new faces. And I thought to myself, okay, well, this probably has something to do with what came out recently. The topic for this podcast, the motu proprio that Francis issued on the 16th. But overall, just with the whole coronavirus and how the dioceses shut down and canceled masses, etc. There's a good handful of new parishioners where I'm at that have come to us because they said that was the final straw for them, and they started looking and searching and they found us.
And I think that that's so brilliant, and it's such an interesting topic because I have so many questions about it. I mean, I really want to know why the hierarchy of the Novus Ordo is doing this. That's one of my main questions. I mean, it doesn't really matter, honestly, because they are doing it and it affects us this way or not. But to me, it's really, I guess, psychologically interesting. What is the reason behind this? But I think it's also it's fascinating to see people, that make this the reason for them to change. There's been plenty of craziness over the last 60 years. Honestly, we all know it. Our grandparents saw it. Our parents saw it. We've seen it. And it's really interesting for me to see that Corona, or closing the churches, or now, abrogating the Latin Mass, that's kind of the last straw. And I guess we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think I want to talk, I want to send this to you, Dad, and then maybe you can try to tell me your opinion of why do you think Bergoglio is doing this? What's the reason?
Well, let me give you a little proposition here to consider. Okay, so go back into our history, into Catholic apologetics, and think about the role of the Pope in the Catholic Church. It's a divinely inspired, divinely architected office, and it's an office that we have the amazing utmost of respect for. In fact, I've heard a story. I don't know if for sure that is true, but I've heard it said that if you were part of the if you were like a legate for Pope Pius XII when he was Pope, and he would call your bishop on the phone, the entire office staff would kneel through the course of the phone call. I mean, that's how high our regard is for this office. But you also think about it, and the men who sit in the office, so granted, as Pope, they're imbued with the indelible character of the office. But for the better part of 500 years, the church only considered 2 of those popes to be saints. So we the office is of the highest respect, but for the men in it, they're not. There was such a high standard for them to be a saint that it was only Pope St. Pius V and Pope St. Pius X over the course of about 500 years. Okay, so now here comes the Novus Ordo, and they take all of our theological underpinnings and they turn it all upside down. What do? They turn they turn the papacy into a personality cult. So it started with Paul VI, most especially JP2, who had these big personalities. And then you start getting on, and they start canonizing each other, all of the all the modernist popes, and make them saints. And I think that what they've done is tried to disregard. They've tried to kind of throw off the papacy as this divinely inspired office, and they've tried to replace it with a personality cult based on the personality of the man who's pretending to be in the office. And so with Bergoglio, I think that's what we have, the full fruiting of that personality cult, to where what he's done now is he's basically said, you know what, I'm going to make any rule I want. I'm going to suppress anybody I want. What are you going to do about it? You can't stop me because I am the Pope. I have this position of power. And it's to me, at least, it's an absolute upside down reality compared to what the papacy should be.
Well, and he's been doing that for years, right? I mean, he's done that. He's done that about hell. He's done that about remarriage after divorce and receiving the sacraments. I mean, he's done that. I mean, he does it over and over. And he brings an idol into St. Peter's, and they worship it with him there bowing to a false god in St. Peter's Church. I mean, this is not something new, which I think is people really have to realize that this isn't Francis just suddenly becoming this crazy liberal. I mean, he's been this the entire time. So and I think we really need to say too that, as Father said at the beginning, this is not something that we just believe is a mistake coming from Bergoglio. This is not just Francis. This goes back 60 years where they definitively changed the Catholic Church. So or I shouldn't say that you cannot change the Catholic Church. They created a new church, and it became the Novus Ordo. And you see absolutely the ugly fruits of that right now. And I think that clung on to it because he is still this man in white in the Vatican. And I guess, eventually the question is, how can we help this in some way? How do we try to help clear the way for people who are in the Novus Ordo and who want the truth? Father, maybe you can answer that. What's the best way we can help people to see the way to the right position?
I think the best way to bring people about is by simply living our Catholic faith. Whenever you think of sedevacant contests, or you think of even the word, as you mentioned earlier, Kevin, you have this bad idea in your mind or a bad taste in your mouth, so to say. And I think if people just saw that we are simply Catholics that are trying to live our Catholic faith, that are trying to be devout, trying to be pious, trying to love the church, stay true to the teachings of the truth, that we have a love for the papacy. If people saw that, and I think that's going to be the best means to bring people about, is just by simply living good Catholic lives and being sincere about it and being honest in our pursuit of living the Catholic faith.
Yeah, I totally agree, Father. One of the things that I learned along the way here is that I tried out on social media and Twitter in particular, kind of had this feeling that I could go out and convert the world through apologetics or through good theological discussion and debate, and got out there and realized that you can have discussions with people, and sometimes they'll be open to discussing, but very, very rarely is somebody open to actually changing their views. And to the extent that they're going to change their views, I kind of really came to realize that it's God who has to do that. And we can lead by example, like you say, and make our movement, make our churches something that is that they look up to, that they want to be a part of. But that's really the best. Well, we're not going to convince much of anybody on anything. I think they have to take the initiative themselves and know there's a problem, know there's something that they need to research, and then they've got to go with the guidance of the Holy Ghost in order to actually make that change.
And that's where I think about, for example, just the quote from Scripture: "Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." And it's definitely a means that we are able to be a light to others in the world about us by simply living our Catholic faith.
Yeah, and that's so true. And it's so true on social media or in our parishes or anywhere we are. And I did a podcast about this a couple months ago now about how we behave in church. And it's the same on social media or anyone we talk to, that, you just don't know that one day that you're in church, or your kids are in church, or you're serving mass, or I'm sure as a priest you're saying mass or giving a sermon, that one day some stranger could walk in that church, and that could decide if they stay in your parish or not. They could decide their entire future of their Catholicism. That's where we're at right now, and I think it's a lot of pressure, but I think it's also a beautiful thing too, that we've had people in our little parish here in Germany that have stayed, and they told us that they stayed because of the young server, the boy who's about, I think, 12 years old, and how fervently he served mass. He said that was a big factor in why they stayed at our parish when they weren't sure if they would go to Novus Ordo or Pius X or with us, and they stayed with us, and they said that was a big reason for it. And I think that's a really, really good story for people to realize that everything you do in church is an example for anyone who might walk in. And I think I have to, before we go, I really have to bring this up, because Father Borja, maybe you can tell me, did you have to take an oath against modernism before you became a priest?
Yes, we had to, and that was by Pope St. Pius X made that mandatory for any cleric in major orders. Whenever he would become a subdeacon, a deacon, and a priest, he would make a profession of faith and take the oath against modernism.
And so that is, since St. Pius X, that is required from any major cleric, right? Any major step in ordination.
Correct. Yes, for any major order.
So again, this is something made by a true pope, which I don't think anyone denies. Even the modernists, they don't like St. Pius X, but I don't think they deny him being a pope. So he says anything modernist is bad, and it just really struck me. I read this in the New York Times today when I just Googled Pope Francis and Latin Mass, and in this article, and I think this really nails it. They say, quote, in the New York Times, quote, many analysts see Francis's pontificate as the restoration of engagement with the modern world after 3 decades of leadership by conservative popes. Now, there's a lot to take from that, because first of all, it's the restoration of engagement with the modern world is truly Francis's message. I mean, there's no question about that. He has no ambition to save souls. He has no ambition to spread the Catholic faith. His only message is fraternity and modernism. And how absurd is that when you think that just less, or I guess maybe now 100 years ago, a pope forced or made every single person who became a major order cleric to swear before God against modernism. It's crazy.
And Francis seems to be more concerned about the environment than the other things that are going on. Like, there in Germany, there's the whole thing where they're blessing unions that are against the God's law. Not a word about that, really. And,
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible when you look at Francis, and we look at, as Dad said about, the respect people had for Pius XII, and Francis really seems like it's like his goal to degrade the papacy and degrade the Catholic Church, and to make it this world religion, which I do think is his goal. Honestly, that's my personal opinion, that he is trying to make it not Catholic. I was telling Ina at dinner today that I really believe that Francis, so once Benedict XVI or Ratzinger dies, which will probably be fairly soon, I think that Bergoglio will resign. And I am confident that before Bergoglio dies, he will say that he is not Catholic, that he is a humanist or I don't even know, someone who believes in the world and fraternity and whatever that is. And because I really don't think he believes in anything. And that's why I asked you guys before, at the beginning of the show, is what's the reason? Because I don't think he believes in the Vatican II Council.
Yeah, not probably. And really, one of the things you have to realize is that for us on the Sedevate Council side, we actually kind of in a way consider Bergoglio to be a gift, because if you were out trying to expand the movement out during the pontificates of JP2 or of Benedict, It was difficult because I mean they came off as kind of being conservative and what are you complaining about? You have your Latin mass and so you had to kind of focus on fine subtle points of Vatican II and the theology that was introduced and that it's just beyond most laymen. And so now I think at least with Bergoglio we have a stark difference, and I do feel like there's a blessing here in that his taking away the Latin Mass for the Society of St. Peter and whoever else is basically him going and kicking the fence out from under the fence setters. And it's going to be to the destruction of many, but I think it's going to be for the salvation of many as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think that for us, as you say, it's a good thing. And we're kind of sitting on the sidelines watching the whole thing and hoping and praying and doing our best to be good Catholics to bring these people who are falling off the fence, to our side. And I think that's what we have to take away from the whole thing, that maybe there is no real rhyme or reason behind the whole thing, or really Francis just trying to create chaos or his own personal ego, trying to stoke the fires of absurdity, I suppose. But it's an interesting time to be alive, I suppose, and it's interesting to see. I saw there was a priest, I don't know where he was, I think in the U.S. that recently wrote a letter to his diocese saying that he is now a sede vacantis. Have you both seen that? I forget his name.
Yeah, I saw the article. I don't think I read it though.
I believe it's done with Bishop Sanborn, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, and I think that's. I really hope that we see more of that, and we see more of these priests like Father Oswald with the CMRI, that they see that this is it's not the truth, that it's not the Catholic Church, and I think it's really interesting because I think this whole thing has really struck me too, that everyone is so upset about just the Latin Mass. The Latin Mass seems to be the only thing that matters, the sights, the sounds, the language, and it is important because it is something that is the tradition of the Catholic Church, and it has been for the last 500 years or since the Council of Trent or before. I mean, for many years, and I guess to me at least, it seems like we need to. I don't know, how do we make it so that we're not just focusing on, hey, we have the Latin Mass, come to us, but more like, hey, we have the truth, come to us. Not just the Latin Mass, but the dogmas and the depth of the traditional Catholic Church, these traditions and the dogmas that go back thousands of years.
Well, let me tell you a quick story, and then Father can probably speak a little bit more in depth, perhaps. But we had there's a family that just recently became sede vacantis. They were from the Denver area. And crazy story. They used to walk by the Denver sede vacantis church on their way to the local Novus Ordo church, and so the wife kind of got curious and went to the people in her church and said, so is it okay if I go to this other church on Sunday because they're Catholic too, right? They say they're Catholic, and the answer they got back was, no, those people are bad. Okay. And she asked, well, what's bad about them? And they just said, well, they're bad. Well, immediately, being an independent-minded thinker, that's going to get her thinking, well, maybe I better check this out. And so it just so happened that I think she was on jury duty or something kind of crazy with a member of that church there, and they got to talking, and it was the gentleman from Our Lady of the Snows, who was just very gentle about everything, was always there to answer questions, never pushed the position, and just always offered answers to every question that she had. And it was one of these examples where you could kind of see by her story that it was the Holy Ghost slowly bringing her in, but it was her and God working together that made it happen. It wasn't the members of the church. It was just one of those things that all we had to do was sit back and let God do his handiwork.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I think that's That's probably a good place to end it. I mean, I think on that topic, there's not a whole lot I've got to say about it. I don't know, Father, do you have anything you want to say about the? What can you say? What can you say about Bergoglio? As Dad said, it's kind of a plus for us. It's a benefit that maybe we will have people coming into our churches. I mean, what do you want to tell anyone who might be listening to this podcast about that situation? Well, I suppose
just the whole aspect of you can't serve two masters. And I mean, I think that we're in the what is it, the ninth hour? It's getting late, and we just God's making it very clear to those who are of goodwill, and who are honestly wanting to do His will and trying to seek the truth. He's leading them to it, and by these things that are happening. And I think that the grace of God is at work definitely in many, many souls, as that story definitely shows. Like you're saying, it's the grace of God. That's at the end of the day what's going to make the difference. That's what's going to bring people about, is the grace of God. And for us, we can do our part by our prayers and our sacrifices in the living of our Catholic faith. But I just think that after everything that's going on with Francis and the whole Pachamama ordeal and just all these other things, this should be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to say.
Yeah, and let's hope that, I guess, if we face persecution in the near future, and if we lose our rights or our freedoms, which I'm definitely very much afraid of here in Germany and in Europe in general, maybe in the US as well, that maybe that's what some people need. Maybe that's exactly how some people are going to find their faith and find God. And in the end, our freedoms and our happiness on earth don't really matter. And I think that if we kind of come to grips with that, as the greatest saints have, then we'll all end up being happier here, and God willing, happier also in heaven. So, Dad, do you have any last words, or should we wrap it up?
Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up here, Kev.
Perfect. Well, Father, thank you so much for coming on. Dad, thank you again. If we have any other news episodes coming up, maybe I'll give you guys a call again. Father Borja, I know you're coming to visit us soon, so maybe we'll just have to do a live episode. I'm just gonna we'll do a selfie episode for a special show here on YouTube. I'm really excited to see you and His Excellency Bishop Veronius coming here in a couple of weeks. But both of you, thank you again for coming on. Hopefully it was impactful to whoever was listening. And until next time, thanks for listening, and God bless.
You've been listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends and family. You can support the production on Patreon and PayPal, and you can reach Kevin at kevin89davis@gmail.com. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, all for the greater glory of God.